All right. Who likes disruption? Anybody? Anybody like innovation? Okay. That's what Clearwire is all about. I'm Erik Prusch. I'm the CEO for Clearwire. Our journey really started back in 2008. We were setting out to do something cataclysmically different, phenomenally different in this space. We were trying to bring the promise of the internet, the promise of the future, to all of the United States. We started out by amassing spectrum. We brought in some great talent. We brought in some great partners. And we did something that was fundamentally different in this industry, something that nobody's ever seen before. What we were able to create with Clearwire back in 2008 actually set the pace for the rest of the industry. Now, before I get into that, let me just do the one thing that I'm required to do, which is let's review our forward-looking statements and cautionary statements here. Other than the fact that legal's asked me to put this up in front of you, we think that the opportunity sitting in front of us is greatly encapsulated by this one slide. What's the growth in the worldwide industry? What's the growth in broadband? Now, Mary Meeker, a few months ago, actually talked about introducing the exabyte and zettabyte era. We're talking about billions of gigabytes of consumption going on in the industry at the same time on short order. What we really mean by that is we're trying to bring the internet everywhere in the United States and frankly everywhere in the globe with the promise of high speeds, the promise of high capacity, being able to do everything in a mobile network that you once were tethered or connected in order to accomplish. This space is growing so fast, we can barely see the CAGR in front of us. We can barely see how far this is going to grow. The space is growing at 78% per annum and is expected to continue growing all the way through 2016. The expectations are we're going to get to 10.8 exabytes in terms of consumption by the year 2016. It's phenomenal growth from where we are today. So we are literally going from a hum to a roar. On top of that, smartphones are helping to fuel the future. Smartphones are the key device today. We're expecting 50% of mobile data traffic going through smartphones in 2 years. Phenomenal success, faster than anybody's ever projected. This is truly the place to be. This is the opportunity that we set out to go do in 2008 and 2009. Relative to where we are in the United States is a microcosm of what's going on in the world. Fundamentally, the US is growing at about the same rate, or approximately 82% CAGR per year expected until 2015. Now, Clearwire within there is growing at even a faster rate. We've done something special. We've done something unlike all the other carriers or all the other data providers in the US. Right now, we've been growing through Q2 at about 100% year-over-year growth. We built an infrastructure to support it. We've added devices to support it. We've enabled our partners to grow alongside with us. And what we've really done is provide a consumer proposition that is unlike every other consumer proposition this space has ever seen. So we're incenting the behavior. We're seeding it. We're allowing customers to use the network the way that they want to use it. We're not imposing caps. We're not reducing speed. We're not trying to monetize it at the expense of customers, but we're trying to enable it for the benefit of customers. It's something special. It's something unique. Now, the one thing that's in common is that all LTE networks are actually not common. What you see here in this slide is the difference between Clearwire's spectrum holdings and all the other carriers' spectrum holdings. What's noticeable? First, we're the largest. We hold the most amount of spectrum going against the 4G problem in the United States, and not by a little, by a lot. The other thing that you'll notice is that our bar is solid. It's all within one band of spectrum. Everybody else has smaller bits of spectrum that they're trying to cobble together to create a solution. Very difficult. It means an ecosystem, an infrastructure needs to support that. We've been able to amass more spectrum in the space, not only than anybody else has, but it's contiguous. It's all the same color of green. That allows us a great deal of flexibility, and it creates a value proposition for our customers, our partners, our shareholders that's unlike everybody else. We've done something special in terms of being able to grow the fastest in the industry. We've grown out to 10.5 million customers in that short period of time, from a standing start. We were the first ones to introduce a network. We were also the first ones to understand what the promise of 4G was all about, to see new applications, to see where consumption is lying within the United States. That growth has actually fueled us even further. I liken it to a sports car. A sports car can look very good on the outside, but without an engine underneath it, it doesn't deliver. We've created not only a sexy sports car on the outside, but we've created an engine through our spectrum holdings to actually create the fuel to drive this industry forward, to push the other carriers to drive forward as well. We were the first ones with unlimited. We will continue to be unlimited because of our spectrum resources that we have. Now, New York is a perfect example of where the need is. We've seen, for those of you who have been in New York, tried to access the networks in New York, you can't help but be frustrated. That means 25 seconds to download a stock quote. That means constant buffering for video. That means not being able to access the data when you need it, how you want it, and the speed at which you need it. New York is the perfect example of being dropped 15 times between JFK and the Midtown Tunnel. What we're doing in terms of our hotspot network and our approach to the marketplace is something completely different. We're focused on where consumption is, and that's in the metropolitan areas. The metropolitan areas are actually driving the growth in the industry. It's not being driven in terms of suburban America. It's not being driven in rural America. It's being driven in the urban cores. That's where the majority of data consumption is. It's also where the greatest spectrum deficiency lies. The ability to get access to a network is not the same in Reno, Nevada, as it is in downtown New York or downtown Chicago. Now, how we're approaching it is in a hotspot network. A hotspot network means we're putting capacity where the demand is greatest. That's not everywhere, even within a metropolitan area. That's where the need is actually acute. That might be in the stadium, that might be in the train station, that might be in Broadway. We're able to bring that capacity real time on a cost-effective way. Something, again, very different than the networks of past. The networks of past were voice application networks. It was all intended for coverage. It was, the effort was meant to be, how do I keep my telephone conversation going? But it was also greatly inefficient, even though technology improved through time. Data is not that way. Data says, I need to get a lot of data very quickly, where I need it, where that concentration is. So what we're able to do in the New Yorks is different. What we're able to do in the New Yorks is what the customer wants. Now, relative to being a disruptor, it really takes an infrastructure. It takes forethought. Being the leader within the space meant that we had to actually anticipate the needs of those customers as we were building out the network. Now, we've done some things that are truly unique. We brought new technology to market first with WiMAX. Then we understood that we actually had to migrate that to LTE. And we're in the midst of that build as we speak. But we also knew that we needed to bring an infrastructure behind it. We wanted 2.5, which is the spectrum band that we hold, or band class 41, to be in every device throughout the United States. Then we set our expectations even higher. We wanted 2.5, band class 41, to be in every device in the world. Now, I'm pleased to announce that China actually just adopted exactly what Clearwire has been promoting. China Mobile is the first. And the equivalent of the FCC, or MIIT, in China, the regulatory body there, just released 190 megahertz to be deployed against TDD in band class 41. recognize that China Mobile has 700 million customers. When you think about how large they are compared to the existing carriers within the United States, they dwarf them. That's an infrastructure. That's scalability. At the same time, we've seen others adopt it as well. To name a few, SoftBank, Bharti in India, Clearwire in the United States. Together, we actually will cover 4.4 billion people in the globe. To what Prusch stated earlier, this is not a North America phenomena. This is now a world phenomena. It's connecting people, it's connecting devices across the globe. And the spectrum band and the technology that's going to do it the greatest will be TDD technology in band class 41. It represents 4.4 billion, or 2/3 of the world's population at this point in time. It spans Europe, it spans Asia, it spans North America. We're excited about our partners. We're excited about seeing chipsets in every device hold band class 41 2.5. That, to us, is going to be a watershed moment, not only for Clearwire and our place within the industry, but phenomenally for all of consumers to be able to travel across boundary and be able to get same speeds, same capabilities, same data, same direction consistently across the world. Now, there are two key opportunities that people are focused on. They're focused on more spectrum, and they're focused on small cells. The funny thing about it is, what we have at Clearwire is an overabundance of the first. Small cells, while certainly a viable solution, it's an expensive solution. And it's greatly underutilized if you don't have the spectrum to back it. It's an interesting technology. It's one that's going to provide more capacity, but it's not going to actually displace the need for more spectrum across the globe. What we're doing in terms of trying to identify more solutions around spectrum is simple. The industry is looking at spectrum auctions, acquiring or swapping additional spectrum, refarming spectrum, or actually creating new spectrum. Now, all of you have probably understood what the dilemmas around this are. Certainly it's expense, and certainly it's time. We're in a unique position with the amount of spectrum that we have. It's cleared, it's available today, and it poses the greatest opportunity for customers to get capacity and partners to get capacity in short order. Again, something very unique. If we're relying on refarming existing spectrum, you're taking it from one usage to another. And even if you get a benefit from increased or improved efficiency by doing it, it still requires a lot of time. The issue is today. I'll go back to New York. The issue is not 3 years from now. The issue is, how do you get the capacity today, because the consumption is growing so rapidly? We have that solution. Now, relative to the rest of what we're doing as Clearwire, it really is geared towards both the technology and the spectrum itself. Yes, we offer more capacity. With capacity comes speed. Now, SoftBank recently just talked about, Masa-san just announced his 300-year plan. His 300-year plan is all around speed. It's all around making the internet available to everyone, a consistent experience. We have the ability to create greater speeds. I'll show you in a second exactly how. But with capacity comes speed. With capacity comes channel sizes and more channels, allowing more customers to use it when they want, how they want it. It also, in band class 41, offers the scalability. We talked a little bit about how we were partnering with chipset and device manufacturers in order to address that 4.4 billion population. We're capable of creating scale that's never been seen before in the industry. Never before has there been a globally harmonized band that can take advantage of similar chipsets and similar devices across the globe. What does that mean? That means the lowest cost per gig. That's a competitive advantage. If you can achieve, with great pieces of spectrum, the lowest cost per gig on a sustainable basis, you truly have achieved competitive advantage. We are focused on exactly that cost differential. And finally, Our urban hot zone is the way that we're approaching the market, which is, again, different, is, again, unique. We're putting capacity where capacity is most needed first. Now, relative to those economies of scale and that competitive advantage, this is representative of what we're talking about. The difference between the top line is what we can sell our spectrum, sell our gigs of spectrum on our network for, and the bottom line, the cost for us to source our spectrum. What's unique in this space is if you are spectrally constrained, what ends up happening over time through cell splits, through trying to increase capacity, trying to rationalize who your customers are, disincenting customers from using gigs of data, or putting tariff structures in place that act as a disincentive, is you actually flatten the curve, flatten the cost curve. If you have a lot of available spectrum and more than anybody else, you're able to ride down that cost curve and create a disparity between what it costs you to source and what you're able to sell it for. That's our sweet spot. We're right between those two lines. What we've heard in terms of other competing carriers who are focused on wholesale is that their costs will actually go up through time because they're going to have to try and cell split their way into additional capacity. We don't have that problem. We're able to ride that cost curve down and create that competitive advantage on a sustainable basis. Now, when we talk about the hot zone strategy, we are focused on the core markets across the United States. We are focused on high density, high usage hotspots. In our top 100 markets where we average about 160 megahertz of spectrum, we are that position A. We're able to deliver the tonnage, the payload, when needed, where necessary. We are expecting this year to get to about 2,000 sites by mid-next year, and probably around 800 sites by the end of this year. We're only paced by the capital that we have available. We're not paced by demand in the industry. There is certainly more demand than there is supply, and we will continue to build out as our capital permits us to do so. But we were the first to do it to begin with. We were the first to get out to 130 million pops, or about a third of the country. We were the fastest to get to 11 million customers. We're going to do it again in terms of hotspot, and we're going to take the knowledge that we've learned about customers, customer behavior, partner behavior, and apply it to this new hotspot strategy. Chicago's, again, another perfect example for us. When you actually look at the tonnage in Chicago, it's in 3 areas. Most of the consumption is only in 3 areas. You can see downtown Chicago and a couple of other locations. We're going to put our capacity to work in those areas because that's where we can generate a greatest return the fastest. That allows us to actually expand operations from there and continue to expand through time. Our first target rollout is about half of our sites that we have today. It's about 8,000 sites. We don't have a time frame yet for it, but it's success-based capital, meaning we will receive a return on the investment that we're putting into the ground, and then we'll reinvest that return back into the network to continue evolving, continue growing. But Chicago is a perfect example because this is one of the cities that also has a least amount of available capacity. You can't cell split your way there. Lower frequency spectrum, you have to up-tilt and down-tilt antenna. You have interference issues. 2.5 doesn't travel as far, but it makes it perfectly matched against the capacity problem. It delivers more tonnage, faster speeds in urban cores. Now, there's also new business models that are evolving as well, and we're excited about this. We have seen more business models developed in this space over the last 18 months than probably the previous 4 or 5 years. We're talking about machine to machine. We're talking about video. And video is the key app right now. While voice may have been the key app yesteryear, now video is the key app. More downloaded videos, more video consumption, more video on demand. We're uniquely positioned to do it. Whether it's broadcast video, so think about the NFL football game that gets broadcast out, or whether it's video on demand, to be able to interact with a video. You've seen a lot of business models developing recently around second screen. What do they all share in common? The need for a lot of capacity, no tethering. I want to bring it with me. I want to consume it wherever I want to, how I want to, and I don't want to have a cap, and I don't want a value proposition that results in an $800 bill at the end of the month. This is an exciting place for us to be. We're going to see more development of new business models around our spectrum and around the available capacity than we've ever seen before over the next 12 to 24 months. Now, I mentioned we have the fastest speeds. Part of the reason we have the fastest speeds is that we're actually contiguous in our spectrum, with an average depth of 160 megahertz or 47 billion megahertz pops of spectrum is what we control. We've, for the first time, received the standard around channel aggregation. What does that mean? Well, most carriers have 5 megahertz by 5 megahertz or 10 megahertz by 10 megahertz. We actually have the ability to have 20 megahertz channel sizes paired with 20 megahertz channel sizes aggregated together to develop a 40 megahertz channel. That is channel aggregation. It's actually virtually putting together channels, and with channel aggregation comes faster speeds. Unless you have that breadth of spectrum, you can't do channel aggregation. So we were the first ones to receive certification or the standard by 3GPP, and we're the only ones who have that contiguous breadth of spectrum to be able to do it. We also, since we reside in TDD technology, we aren't dependent on paired spectrum, which means that we can actually create a much more efficient distribution. For those of you who use the internet on a regular basis through your mobile broadband connections, you'll understand when I say most of the work you do is a download. It's not upload. We're able to put more spectrum to the problem than other carriers. If you have paired spectrum, you have to apply one channel to download, one channel to upload. We're able to actually change that ratio. We're actually able to put more spectrum to work on a download basis, which actually improves your speed. There's no sense in having a very fast upload if you don't use upload as much. Channel aggregation is clearly a differentiator for us in this space. So, how this translates for Clearwire is simple. We've seen spectrum value change dramatically over the last couple of years. What once was considered beachfront property or low-frequency spectrum is no longer sought after in great size. 2.5 spectrum, band class 41, is that sweet spot because of how much we have available. We've seen a lot of spectrum deals going towards 2.5. We've seen spectrum at 2.0, 1.9, 2.1, 2.3, and all of the sales are all heading in the same direction, which means the values are going up. The highest one on record right now was Spectrum Co. So it was Verizon's acquisition of Spectrum with Spectrum Co. at 72 cents per megahertz pop. That is tremendous value for a company like Clearwire that has 47 billion megahertz pops of spectrum. It also indicates that all the carriers are looking at the problem in a similar way, which is how do I get capacity? How do I get it today? When is it going to become available? And we're going to see values continue to evolve or increase, which is ultimately going to translate into our value, Clearwire's value, into the space. We are at the right place at the right time with the right strategy, with the right technology and the right set of assets. Thank you very much.
Minutes if anybody wants to take this microphone and ask a question. Anybody want a question? Because if you're not going to ask them, I have to, right?
Erik, thanks. That was a great way to kick off 4G world. So in the 4G wholesale model that you're
service provider part of the value chain?
It's a great question. So when we're talking about creating new business models, what we're seeing is the emergence of new business models left and right. We're also seeing a lot of established players all trying to figure out their mobile strategy. If you thought about cloud computing, if you thought about e-commerce, if you thought about the ways that people are trying to monetize mobile, the one thing that they all share in common is that need for infrastructure, that need for speed, that need for capacity. We're seeing Facebook have to develop a mobile broadband plan. How do they monetize it? We are seeing all companies trying to go more towards a tablet, more towards or less towards saving data in common platforms that are connected and take them into a mobile environment. For us, we've also seen the emergence of companies like Freedom Pop, Net Zero. A lot of different companies are creating applications or creating new offerings around the space. What they represent is a disruption into the space. They're doing it differently. How we enable them is we provide them that capacity. We provide them that cost-effective way to get to market quickly and do something that's not contemplated. It's not at $16 a gig, which other carriers are offering. It's at something significantly cheaper that they can then translate. On our network, 60% of our network is video. There are a number of video applications that are coming out that are dependent upon securing data cheaply. We're going to be in that position to do it.
So in that context then, when will Amazon be enabled by 4G?
So Amazon is looking at how they can. Amazon's already tried to create their own video distribution. They are clearly an e-commerce engine who understands the benefit of being able to apply it into mobile environments. They don't want to require customers to have to be tethered in order to do a transaction. And they're actually expanding horizontally across many different avenues. Enterprise services, small, medium business services, and consumer businesses as well. Amazon is a perfect example. Microsoft is another example. Google is another example. All of them have to figure out how they're going to get to their mobile strategy in order to propel their businesses forward and get their share of wallet or get their share of opportunity.
So Eric, one of the fastest growing segments of the market is the tablet market. And we've seen skyrocketing sales, but only 10% of tablets are going out with a subscription to a mobile service. Most of them are using Wi-Fi only. And for those that are enabled, have to choose what operator they're going to be tethered to, and that locks you in, et cetera. It's really not the kind of market we were hoping for enabling tablets. You talked about Freedom Pop, and Freedom Pop comes up with a glove that goes over an iPhone. When is somebody going to give us freedom for the tablet?
We hope to. I mean, the short answer is nobody wants to be tethered just to an operator and then that operator doesn't have the ability to deliver against it. What we've seen in terms of tablets is exactly that move to mobile, whether it's second screen or whether it's on your daily commute. They all have the same thing in common. They need to have access. They need to have access. Wi-Fi is not going to do it. Wi-Fi in and of itself is limited, and it's limited in a number of ways. It's posed as a decent solution for the time, but it ultimately doesn't give security. It doesn't give throughput speed because there's still contention in the network. And just as importantly, it doesn't have large swaths of spectrum underlying it. So it's not secure, it doesn't have a lot of capacity, and you will suffer from the speed. And nobody wants to trade off Wi-Fi network to Wi-Fi network to Wi-Fi network in order to keep that stream. We want to provide that end-to-end seamless experience across the country. And that's through partnering. That's not just our own network. That enables all the devices to interoperate. And it provides a value proposition that's never been seen before, where we're offering unlimited data at about $45 a month is something that no other operator has been able to do. We've fueled Sprint. We plan on fueling others. We're providing the capacity for the Freedom Pops, but it's just a matter of time. I think we'll see that as we get our LTE network out, we'll see more and more tablets, more and more devices trying to harness the value of 4G the speed of 4G and the capacity of it.
Very good. Eric, thank you for
Thank you.
kicking off 4G World.
You bet.